So I guess you guys have all gathered that I'm Cindy, and thank you for coming out tonight. I had quite a harrowing experience getting here yesterday, and I in fact didn't get here until about 1 o'clock this afternoon. I was supposed to be here last night, so it was a traveling airplane difficulty. So I might not be like 100% on my best. I never know what I'm going to say anyway, so I'm just so excited to start talking because I don't even know what I'm going to say. And when I'm tired, and I might get a little goofy to top everything else off. So first let me do my commercials. I used to teach math, so I feel like I should start slamming these things around and showing you guys equations and stuff. Commercials. First commercial. This is a flyer for my new endeavor, and I have a new organization called Piece of the Action, P-E-A-C-E of the Action. Our website is pieceoftheaction. I feel like I get louder when I turn over here. It's distracting me. I need a wardrobe adjustment. Pieceoftheaction.org, and we are on Facebook. There's a lot of young people, but a lot of older people are getting on to mess Facebook up for us. And I'm an older person, so I can say that because I'm an older person. And so this is thing we did in March called Camp Out Now. We actually had a lot of students from Cortland come to stay with us for a week when they were on spring break. And we set up a camp on the lawn of the Washington Monument where our demands are the same as they were under George Bush: troops out of Iraq, Afghanistan, stop the drone bombings, close the bases, close the torture prisons. And we got shut down by the police, and I actually spent a weekend in jail in Washington, D.C., and I have a stay-away order from the White House. So if I go anywhere near the White House, I go to prison for a mandatory 6 months. I know. For stepping on a sidewalk, I go to prison for 6 months. There's some people who literally have killed millions of people, and they're still roaming free. And so we're starting this again at the end of May. So we're going to set up a camp on the lawn of the Washington Monument. We're hoping that the reason our first camp lost juice was because all our students had to go back to college. So we're hoping a lot of students come and help us out through the summer, and we'll be doing acts of civil resistance on a daily basis in the nation's capital to say that, first of all, the anti-war movement has been happening now for a long time. Years. We haven't been able to change policy at all. So why do we think that marching in circles on a Saturday in Washington, D.C., when nobody's there, is going to change anything? We literally, our last march, we started in Lafayette Park in front of the White House. We marched around in a big circle and ended up in Lafayette Park again. And I say we walk by these buildings that nobody's in, and we say, you dumb buildings, if you guys don't straighten up, we're coming back and we're going to march in front of you again next year. And how do the policymakers care about that? So unless we change the way we do things in the anti-war movement, we're not going to be effective. So we're hoping to do these acts. Yes, we can clap for that. And we want to be effective, I think. I think we want the wars to end. But, you know, the definition of doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results is insanity. So we have to change our tactics. We have to change our strategy. We're smaller, so we have to be smarter. So you can get a flyer about that. You can put it on your Facebook page. You can link to a Piece of the Action. Become one of my friends. I have 2 Facebook pages because you can only have 5,000 friends. So I have 5,000 friends on one and about 2,000 friends on another. So if you want to be my Facebook friend, It's a picture that has a pink background. Okay, so that's my first commercial. My second commercial, you can see how polished these are, is the two books that are here from River Reads. I will sign those too. You have to buy them from River Reads. This is my first book, Not One More Mother's Child. It's about before I went to Crawford, Texas, and sat in a ditch in Crawford for a month. And it's got pictures, and it's got my blogs from there. It's got some interviews I did, and some articles that I wrote. And then this book is my second book called Dear President Bush, and it's mostly a compilation of articles that I did. Then I have another book that's not here called Peace Mom, One Mother's Journey Through Heartache to Activism. And that's hardback, and that's it's about from when my son was killed in Iraq in April of 2004. It's been 6 years. It was 6 years last Sunday. To about April of 2006. And my final two books are ebooks I'm going to talk about now, but I'm also writing a book called I Left My Marbles in San Francisco. And that's going to be about my campaign against Nancy Pelosi. And my book is called Myth America, M-Y-T-H America. I don't have a lisp. And it's about, the subtitle is 20 Greatest Myths of the Robber Class and the Case for Revolution. The one myth I didn't write about in this book that I'm going to write in I Left My Marbles in San Francisco is the myth that San Francisco is liberal. So I will write about that in I Left My Marbles in San Francisco. That's a play on, did you guys know, the young people are here, there's a song called I Left My Heart in San Francisco. It's a play on that for you young people that aren't as cool as us old people. Okay, my very last commercial. So I am here to promote and talk about not just my activism that has continued, didn't stop. Just because they don't show it on Fox News or CNN anymore doesn't mean I have stopped working. In fact, they show me on Fox more than they show me on CNN. But this is called Myth America 2. My first one was Myth America, 10 Greatest Myths of the Robber Class. So I rewrote it to make it 20 Greatest Myths of the Robber Class. And we could literally have volumes, but I'm going to stop at 20 Greatest Myths. And so it is an e-booklet, like Jim said. It's a PDF file. And right now, my assistant Barbara is going to pass around a sign-up sheet. So this is to get on my email list, but also, if you buy this book today for $15, I go back to where I'm staying and I email you the PDF file. So I have to have your email and I have to be able to read it. And then when you pay me the $15, I make a check mark and then I send you the PDF file. Now I find myself that I can now read better on a computer screen. If I start to read something that's paper, it can't keep my attention for some reason. I don't know why. And so I start to fall asleep if I'm reading. So I have my laptop, and I'm going to get one of those reader things to take on airplanes when I can afford it. But, you know, I have a hard time. I'm sorry, book lady, because I love books. I have been a reader my whole life, and I just love books. And I don't know what happened to me, but something happened to where I can only read off the computer screen now. I don't know. That's really sad. Huh? iBrain. Oh, iBrain. I just called one of my friends an iNerd. So anyway, you can do it that way. You can read it off your computer screen or whatever, or you can print it out. And I have a copy that's printed out, but I didn't lug it with me. from California to here. So anyway, if you buy it, tonight I will sign the cover page. This is the cover page. So I'll sign you the cover page if you buy it tonight. And it is a PDF file. If you don't have that technology, I can email it to Staples or your local print shop or whatever, and they can print the file out for you. Okay, that's all about my commercials. Now I'll talk about it. So anyway, like I mentioned, I ran against Nancy Pelosi in 2008. And if you guys want to have some audience participation, whenever I say Nancy Pelosi, if you go, it keeps you away, or whatever, boo. Whatever you want to do. But let's test it out. Nancy Pelosi. Okay, pretty good. And I'm, I want to like divorce myself from the Tea Party people, because they say some of the same things that I say, but they're saying it from a totally different perspective, right? Not Tea Party people, tea baggers. Some Tea Party people are libertarians that have a well-grounded political philosophy. But tea baggers just have slogans. Tea baggers just know they hate Barack Obama, and they know they hate Nancy Pelosi, and they know they hate yeah, thank you, you guys are good. Good. And they know that they hate other people, but they don't know why. They have no freaking idea. They just know that Glenn Beck told them to hate these people. So they hate these people. Yeah, Glenn Beck. So I just want to divorce myself from the tea baggers, to say that my philosophy, my criticisms of the system come from a left perspective. And I hate to even say left anymore, because I don't know where that is. Some people call Hillary Clinton, say she's on the left. If Hillary Clinton's on the left, I'm somewhere way out there. I'm not even on the scale. So we'll wait till all these people leave. I already said something to offend you? That was fast. That's a record. That's a record. You know what else is a record? I'm banned from the whole city of Scranton. I've never been banned from a whole city before. I've been banned from parts of cities and places in cities, but I've never been banned from an entire city. First, I was banned from anything that's Catholic, and then the Catholics banned me from the Methodists, and then I got banned from a private theater there. So, I was shut out of the whole city of Scranton. I've never been shut out from a whole city before. So that's another first, too. But anyway, on the subject of offending people, is that I didn't come here to praise Barack Obama, but I didn't come here to bury him either. I came here just to tell the truth. And unfortunately, the truth looks very similar since Barack Obama is president as it did when George Bush was president. So I'm going to be here, I'm going to be telling the truth, and I don't mean to offend people, but you might get offended anyway. But I don't mean to, because you all look like very nice people. And so anyway, I decided to run against Nancy Pelosi. That should show you that my ideology is rooted in issues. It's not rooted in political party. It's not rooted in personality. It's rooted in issues. You know why I ran against Nancy Pelosi? It's better. Because she voted for the war. She funded the war even when George Bush was president. And you know what she told me to my face in 2005? She told me this, Barack Obama told me this, other leading Democrats told me to my face, Cindy, you help us get control back of the House and the Senate, and we'll help you end the wars. And so during the campaigns, they were saying things that were contrary to what they promised me in 2006. And so 2007 comes, they're, what do they call this? They're sworn in, whatever. And the very first chance they got, they voted to fund George Bush's wars. Now, that's when I started to separate myself totally from them. And then Nancy Pelosi, of course, when she, I'm going to say her name so much, you don't have to do that unless you want to. Unless you want to. In fact, I'm going to stop talking about her pretty soon anyway. She kept on saying when she was running for her seat that led to her speakership, what did she keep on saying? Impeachment is off the table. And my thing was like, you know, lady, it's not your table. It's the table of the people. And you're not going to tell us what's on it. We're telling you, and we're putting you in power to impeach George Bush. And then their excuse was, well, then Dick Cheney will be in charge. And my answer was always, well, then impeach him first. Yeah. You know, that you can impeach a vice president too. And so in 2007, I decided to run against Miss Impeachment's off the table. Impeachment's off the table, but war funding's on the table. And during my campaign, I ran as an independent. There's some people falsely believe I ran against her in a Democratic primary, but I left the Democratic Party. So I ran against her in the generals as an independent. And it was a 2-year campaign. It was a campaign just to get on the ballot. And I got on the ballot like in August, and then we started campaigning really hard for the general. And I actually came in second. Thank you. And to illustrate how bad the media is, CNN Election Central, they have all the results for all of the elections, and in California's 8th district, which is San Francisco, they put Nancy Pelosi's results. She got 71%, yeah. Psst. She got 71%. First time ever she got below 83%. She got 71%, and they reported the Republicans' results. She got 9%. I got 17%. They didn't put me in there at all. So they put the Democrat and the Republican. Mr. Independent, Michael, that shows you where our media is. You know, I ran a dedicated, hard, committed campaign. We raised about $700,000. I spent that plus. And they didn't even report my results on CNN Election Central. And I realized I ran against her because I thought, wow, what an opportunity to bring up the issues. Because I know Barack Obama, well, by then we didn't know who the candidates were going to be. I knew the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate would not talk about issues. They would talk about style and not substance. And when it came to substance, did anybody but me notice that they were very similar on substantive things? You know, so they tried to talk about who was the best Christian, who was going to send more troops to Afghanistan, you know, things like that. That's what and so I said, I'll run against Nancy Pelosi. Nothing. I'll run against Nancy Pelosi, and since I have a national platform, or I did, until I ran against her, we'll be able to discuss issues. We'll be able to talk about the war. We'll be able to talk about impeachment. We'll be able to talk about the economy and health care and all of the labor, jobs. We'll be able to talk about that. But no, I got totally shut out. I got shut out of so-called progressive media. I haven't been on like Randy Rhoads for years. I was just on Democracy Now! A couple of weeks ago for the first time in years. You know, of course I got shut out of all the national media, and the paper of record in San Francisco maybe wrote 3 articles mentioning me the whole time I was running. And their punchline was always, but she has no chance to win. And so just a total blackout of my campaign. The rules if you want to run as an independent or third party are different than if you want to run as a Democrat or a Republican. So during that time, I figured the people, us, that means us, we're practically voiceless. And so though I disagree with the teabaggers, I understand their frustration. I understand why they feel they have to disrupt. Because that's what we've been doing. That's what we did during the 8 years of the Bush administration. And that's what we have to start doing now because the Obama administration is not listening to us either. So I started to get the germ of Myth America when I was running against Nancy Pelosi. The thing that pushed me over the edge was the bankster bailout. It was in late October of 2008. And from out of nowhere, you know, Henry Paulson, that lady, Harry Reid, Bush, they started telling us if we don't dump billions of dollars into the banking system, it's going to collapse. And that was like, where'd that come from? Their mortgage-backed derivatives started to become toxic. So what did we do with $750 billion? We bought toxic assets. And their economy has been great, while our economy is collapsing. So I came really late into this whole, activity. You know, before my son was killed, I was what you would consider or classify as a soccer mom. You know, I did everything with and for my kids. As a matter of fact, in the years that they were teenagers, I was their Catholic youth minister. That's what cracks me up, that I got banned from the whole Catholic Church in Scranton. I worked for the church for 8 years. And so everything was for my kids, did everything with my kids, for my kids. I really don't know what rebellious teenage years are because my kids and I have and had a great relationship. But when Casey was killed, my oldest, of course, it turned my life upside down. Even though I disagreed with George Bush, I never voted for him, I didn't agree with his wars, neither did Casey, none of my family did. I didn't do anything about it. So after Casey was killed, you know, I instantly felt ashamed, but I started to do more research in not just why we were in Iraq, but why are we in Afghanistan? Why were we in Vietnam? You know, I started to really dig deep into the empire, and I was a history major. I went to UCLA. Since Casey was killed, I've learned more in 6 years than I did, you know, being an honor student in history at UCLA. And so you'll have to give me a little slack. Because after my campaign against that lady, I realized, and she comes from a very wealthy family, very wealthy robber class family in Baltimore. She married a very wealthy man. They very much profit off of the system. So the Speaker of the House profits off the system. And she's there to prop it up and keep it going. And so I realized after Obama was inaugurated, I kept on saying, the wars are wrong. I didn't agree with his policy when he was a candidate. I didn't agree with sending more troops to Afghanistan. I didn't agree with him agreeing with George Bush's status of forces agreement in Iraq. I didn't agree with many things that he said. And I couldn't understand why the movement was supporting him. I supported Cynthia McKinney, who was a Green Party candidate. And so anyway, I understand, though, that we wanted to get rid of Bush. I mean, that was what I still work for. I still think that he should be going to prison. I still think that Dick Cheney should be going to prison. But this is something I also understand. And I started understanding it during the whole time the Democrats were exploiting the anti-war movement to get in power, was that it's not about a political party. It's not about a personality. It's about the system. The system is cancerous. So I was in Colorado one time, Boulder, Colorado, and I said this for the very first time. I said, you know what? George Bush, we all agree that we don't like him. As a matter of fact, for 8 years, we loved to hate George Bush. And don't say you didn't. It was like our raison d'etre. It was our reason for living, was hating George Bush. But George Bush, and I said this in 2006 in October, he's just a boil on the ass of democracy. Now, this is going to get a little gross for a second. But if you have a boil, it's not just the physical thing you see. It's because there's something wrong inside you, right? You have a virus, or you have a germ. There's something systemically wrong with you to get a boil. So if you lance it and you don't cure the disease, what happens? The boil will come back. And that's the same thing with George Bush. You know, we lanced him, but nothing has changed. You know, we've had a cosmetic change, and that's all. You can also put cover-up on a boil. And that's basically what happened. So, you know, it's like saying that a cosmetic change is change. That's not true. It's like we had a dilapidated building and we slapped a fresh coat of paint on it and say that it's fixed. No, the inside is still rotting. And so when we get all caught up in hating one person, not just hating one person, but like I said, loving to hate one person, or loving and worshiping another person, we lose sight of the real problem. And the real problem in this country is the system. And so I did all this analyzation in my head, because I had about 3 friends left. You know, for the Bush administration, half this country hated me, and half liked me or loved me. And when Obama became president, and I didn't become hypnotized like everybody else, and when I was saying, yeah, everybody was under some kind of hypnosis. And when I was saying, but he drone bombed Pakistan. 4 dozen people were killed on the Friday he was inaugurated. I didn't like it when Bush was doing it. Well, how come I'm supposed to like it now that Obama's doing it? You know, let's talk about the policies. Let's talk about the actions. It doesn't matter how pretty somebody talks. If their actions are in 180 degrees opposite of what they're saying, their words are meaningless. It doesn't matter if he can pronounce nuclear. You know? And so then I lost most of my other friends. And I literally had just a couple friends left. And so it was a very lonely time. But I thought, why do people who rightly opposed what Bush was doing, why do they all of a sudden support it? Oh. Okay, why do they all of a sudden support what Obama's doing if it's the same thing? What keeps smart people invested in such a system that harms them? And I thought, I was laying literally in bed one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, tossing and turning and feeling sorry for myself, when I thought it must be because people we're mythologized in this country. We're raised on certain myths. And then the title came to my head, Myth America. And I thought, that's an awesome title. I'm going to get up and I'm going to write an article. But when I got up to write the article, I realized it wasn't an article, it was a book. So I came up with 10 myths at first. And then I realized, I don't know if I realized it before or after, but the Wobblies are out there. And their sign says something like, the only war is a class war. And I realized that the only relevant division in this country is a class division. The other divisions are superficial divisions. We feel them deeply. Here in the robbed class, we feel them deeply. And I broke up our country and our world into two classes. The robber class, and I thought of robber class first, because they're literally robbing us with our money. They're taking our money from us. They're taking our land, our resources, our dignity, and they even take our children, and they kill them in their wars for profit. They profit, and our kids die. And not only do our kids die, but they kill other people's kids of the same class. We're all in the same class, and we let the robber class use us for their profit and for their power. So I thought, if there's a robber class, there must be a robbed class. And I don't know about any of you, but I'm in the robbed class. I've been in the robbed class all my life, and I didn't even know it. You know, I grew up in a poor working class family, and I thought we were middle class. And people come and they say, you know, Barack Obama and all those other people will say, we need to strengthen the middle class. We need to strengthen the middle class. They never talk about the working class or the poor class or the fact that 2% of this country owns a majority of the wealth. And we share the rest of the wealth. So I thought, you know what? The only reason you can be robbed is if you let yourself be robbed. You know, but these people can use force to rob you. So I thought, how can we stop being robbed? The only way we can stop being robbed is to organize, is to work together, is to join in communities, to say, we're not sending you our hard-earned money anymore. The only way we create money, does anybody know how we create money in this country?
Federal Reserve.
We don't print it, usually. It's the Federal Reserve, but how does the Federal Reserve create money? It's by debt. It's by debt. 90% of the money in this country is based on debt. Only 30% of our so-called wealth is in actual money. 70% is ephemeral, but you put down 10% on a car, 90% of that is just numbers. It's just imaginary money. And Barack Obama said last year that debt is the lifeblood of our economy. Debt is the lifeblood of the robber class economy. They couldn't exist without debt. And slavery, you know, forced black slavery ended in this country a long time ago. But almost each and every one of us are slaves to the banks. We're debt slaves. We have to work in our jobs to pay the banks, to keep the banks going, to keep the robber class going. So anyway, I'm figuring all this stuff out by myself. I thought I was the first person in the history to do a class analysis, and then I realized, no, many other people have done that. I think I'm the first to break us into the robber class and the rob class, though. And so after I wrote Myth America 1, the 10 Greatest Myths, I went on a 40-city crusade. I went to 40 different towns. I talked to thousands of people about the revolution that I talk about, because it's called 20 Greatest Myths of the Robber Class and the Case for Revolution. You know, my revolution is not a violent revolution, but many people think that we need one of those. And they say, Cindy, when do you think a violent revolution is justified? Well, I think we passed that point a long time ago. You know, what did Thomas Jefferson say? That to keep our democracy vibrant, we're going to need a revolution every generation. We haven't had that. And so, but I'm also thinking that this empire that we live in is verging on being psychopathic. And how are you going to have a violent revolution against a psychopath that has nuclear bombs? You know, so my revolution is a peaceful revolution. It's a grassroots revolution, and it's a subversive revolution. I call it a Robin Hood revolution. It's stealing from the rich to help us, the poor. It's by not participating as much as we cannot participate in their system. I'm not talking about moving to the woods and being a Unabomber. I'm talking about doing something that we lost in this country a long time ago, and that's creating community. Now, people my age, right around my age, know what I'm talking about. I grew up in the 60s, and most of the mothers did not work. So I would leave my house, and I would literally have 20 mothers on my block. Cindy Miller, what are you doing? What are you up to? But we don't have that. Sometimes we don't even know our neighbors anymore. And I'm not advocating that we start beating the children of our neighbors like used to happen. And I'm not kidding, young people. My neighbor lady felt very comfortable swatting me on the butt. You know, now, of course, a 10-year-old would call Child Protective Services on that lady. But I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating creating healthy communities by creating community, by growing as much of our own food as we can, having not just store co-ops, but growing cooperatives, by getting off the grid as much as we can, by buying, supporting stores like River Reeds, you know, buying local. Don't buy at the global companies that do nothing to support our communities, but in fact drain our communities. Walmart. You know, save time, save money, go downtown, walk downtown, do as much as you can to not participate in the robber class economy, because that's the way we're going to bring them down. It'll be economically, not by force. And that's what they understand. They understand their pocketbooks. So if we start to, for example, take your money out of robber class banks. What's a robber class bank? Chase, B of A, tell me some other robber class banks. Citibank. Citibank. I focus on Chase Manhattan. Take your money out of those banks. I hope nobody here works for them. And put them in community banks or credit unions. You know, something that is not so tied up to the Federal Reserve System. I think that the Federal Reserve should be abolished. But that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. So we need to abolish it out of our lives. I think the federal electoral system is diseased. The robber class actually owns that system. They don't just own the system, they own the machines we vote on. You know, I would love to have paper hand-counted ballots. I would love to have the ranked voting. I would love to have publicly financed elections. But that is not going to happen in a federal level. So get it at a local level. San Francisco has all those things. The city and county of San Francisco has term limits, publicly financed campaigns, hand-counted paper ballots, and that ranked voting system. So you can vote for the person of your choice as number one, and then vote for another person as number two. And so we do have some greens in our city and county government and in our school board. So work for that on a local level. Thomas Jefferson said, the government that has the most authority over you should be the closest one, not the behemoth in Washington, D.C. You know, not the government that is beholden to the special interests. You know, the people we elect, we think we elect, actually govern for the robber class, for the lobbyists, for the corporations, for the military-industrial complex, for the insurance companies. That's who they govern for, not for us. So we have to be more concerned about changing things on our local level, things that will actually improve our lives today. And that's what my revolution is about. And I see it happening all over the country. I go to communities that already have community gardening. I go to communities that have scrip. Isn't there a community around here that has scrip? Ithaca. You know, have community scrip. The only state that's not failing is the one that has a state bank. South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, one of those states has a state bank. And they're the only ones that aren't in serious economic problems. So work together as a community on a very local level. And buy my book. And I have 20 myths in my book. I don't have it in front of me, but I do want to tell you a couple of my myths. The very first myth that I talk about and dispel is the myth that the United States is the greatest nation in the universe. Now, I usually don't hear the universe. I usually hear it's the greatest nation in history, it's the greatest nation on the planet, but I like to use hyperbole to illustrate my point. But this isn't really hyperbolic. Imagine that we discover there's a planet in another solar system that's similar to Earth, and it does have nation states on it. And that there is that nation that claims to be the greatest nation on that planet. Here in America, in the United States of America, we don't need to know a thing about that nation. We already know that we're better than it, you know? And I'm not even kidding. Which way's north? From here, from where I'm standing, north. That way? There's a country north of us called Canada. I like to call it Canada. Canada. Most people in this country think that most Canadians hate their healthcare system. Then there's a country south of us called Mexico. Most people in this country think that Mexicans want to move to the United States, want to steal our crappy grape-picking jobs, want to steal our crappy dishwashing jobs. No, they don't. They want to live in their own country, but they also want to earn a living. So we don't even know anything about the countries north and south of us. And we think we're better than them, so why should we know anything about Planet X's greatest country on the planet? Now, that's this myth that we live in the greatest nation in the universe, is the foundational myth. It's the myth that lets us believe everything else. It's the myth that even led us to believe that 19 Muslims with box cutters caused 9/11. It's the myth that lets us believe that a lone gunman killed anybody that's been assassinated in this country. It's the myth that leads us to believe such things as the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the Maine, the Lusitania. It leads us to believe that our greatest country in the universe, if it does bad things, it has good intentions. So that's, I'm going to tell one story and then I'm going to take questions, because I usually have really long answers too. When I was in second grade, it was in 1964. I was born in 57. That makes me 52. I see people trying to do the math. My teacher, I was in a second, third grade combination. There was just a few of us second graders, and believe it or not, I was painfully shy. Up until I was like 25. I was very, I couldn't even imagine speaking to a crowd of people when I was 25. So anyway, I was really shy, but for some reason my teacher liked me. And so Miss McMurray, I rarely answered in class because I was shy. So Miss McMurray asked us a question. She said, what would you do? Okay, this is 1964. What were we afraid of in 64? Russia. Communists. Now it's terrorists. So my teacher said, what would you do if it was always a red communist, and I was always picturing these people who were red Chinese, red Russians. If a red communist, and I already knew what a communist was, I was only 7 years old. I didn't really know what they were. I just knew that they were really bad and scary, and they wanted to kill me, and there might be one under my bed. That's what I knew. It was like the Holy Ghost. We used to call the Holy Spirit the Holy Ghost, since I was terrified of the Holy Ghost. And so anyway, my teacher said, what would you do if a communist came up to you, and I'm 7 years old. What I'm about to tell you is child abuse. Comes up to you and puts a gun to your head and tells you not to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So I knew this answer. I raised my hand, and she's like, Cindy Miller? And I said, I wouldn't say it. I mean, who would? I'm going to kill you if you recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And that was not the right answer. I had to go stand in the corner and think about it. So even when I was 7, I was being called anti-American. So that just is an illustration of this, how we are, even parents do it intentionally. We mythologize our children, you know, and I've called what we live in a mythocracy. You know, the reality doesn't even come close to the myth. But I want to tell you, the higher up you are on the economic food chain, the closer the myth. That's okay. The communists, or Rahm Emanuel. I blame him for everything bad that happens to me. So, the higher up you are on the economic food chain, the closer the myth and the reality of this country are. The lower you get, the wider the disparity is. And so one of the other myths, I promised you I would take questions, but one of the other myths is that if you work hard enough, if you're smart enough, if you keep your nose clean, and if you do everything right, you too shall be a robber. You know, that's the myth of, you know, the streets are lined with gold, that everybody in this country has equal opportunity. Well, that's the biggest piece of bullshit that they've ever told us. We do not. we do not have equal opportunity. And my position is, why would you want to be one of those people? You know, those people have only achieved robber class status by murder and stealing. And for many generations of murder and stealing. So anyway, that's my presentation. Take questions and we'll be able to flush this philosophy. You can ask me about anything too. In a perfect world, I believe that socialism is the way to go. If you're going to have a government, if you're going to have a system, I think, and I've seen socialism work in other parts of the world, but since we don't live in a perfect world, not anywhere near, I've tended towards more of the anarchist side. And there's a philosophy of anarchism called anarcho-syndicalism, but I don't really fit. That's like a workers' anarchy. I don't really fit into that, so I say I'm an anarcho-syndicalist. Because I don't like anybody to say you're a socialist, you're whatever. And so I call myself a revolutionary anarcho-syndicalist. If you want to be a syndicalist, that's cool too. Or you can be a Sheehanista. We like that too. I actually have a chapter in my book about our so-called freedoms. And one of the myths is that we have a free press in the United States. And I'll tell you the evolution of my experience with the United States corporate media. Okay, and you know that I didn't just fall off a pumpkin truck on Prairie Chapel Road on August 6, 2005. My son was killed on April 4th of 2004, and I was working very diligently. I founded Gold Star Families for Peace. I spoke at the Downing Street memo hearings in the basement of Congress in June of 2005. So I was doing stuff, working very hard before I went to Crawford, when most everybody else heard about me. And so I did a few media shows, you know, like Larry King, except without Larry King, because I think you only get on with Larry King if you have some kind of sex scandal. You know, we always joked during my campaign that a sex scandal would actually help my campaign. But it never happened, so we almost made one up, just to. So anyway, and I was on like MSNBC, and you know, I did a lot of Air America when Air America was on. So anyway, I was starting to make inroads into the corporate media world, and then I did that thing in Crawford, and then of course everybody was paying attention. You know, all over the world. Somebody counted the first week, I did 250 interviews in the first week. That's crazy. That's like almost 40 a day. You know, and literally I would go to bed with a raw throat every night from doing so many interviews. So anyway, they really covered me like the first week, and I thought that the coverage was pretty fair. You know, but I don't know what happened. Because by Sunday, I went there on a Saturday. By Thursday, I went there on Saturday with a few dozen people. Most of the people left, and I stayed the night with 6 other people the first night. By Thursday, we had 700 people that came to Camp Casey. By that weekend, thousands came that one day. And so anyway, Sunday, they started attacking me with things that, did you say this, did you say that? Did you call George Bush a terrorist? I was like, yeah. You know, what's the difference between flying planes into buildings or dropping bombs from planes onto buildings and killing many times more people than Osama bin Laden did. At that point, it was only 100,000. Now it's over 1 million. So yeah, I call him a terrorist. What about it? You know, did you say this? Did you say that? Did you call your teacher a poo-poo head? No, they didn't say that. But anyway, and I think what happened, I've done a lot of thinking and analyzing about this, is that when they saw thousands of people come, they knew I wasn't just a lone protester. They knew I wasn't the only one in the country that felt this way. And not only were lots of people coming, but there were a lot of veterans coming. There were a lot of veterans from Vietnam, Korea, these wars. There were a lot of other families who lost loved ones came. A lot of families who had loved ones in the service. So they recognized that it was a movement, not just Cindy Sheehan. And so who was the recognizable face of that movement but me? And so if they started to undermine me, they maybe could undermine the movement. So all of a sudden, all kinds of stuff, lies, just total lies started surfacing about me. If none of you have ever been Karl roved before, it certainly is challenging to read one day that you left your son when he was 3 years old. That you left the family and you didn't even raise your son. You know, and stuff. And my husband and I were separated before I went to Crawford. But, you know, during the whole experience, he left me because I was crazy. I couldn't get over my son's death. He thought what I was doing was crazy, which nothing of the kind was the truth. So I think to undermine the movement, they tried to undermine me. Fortunately, most of it didn't stick with most of the people. You know, some people still come and say, you know, you didn't even care about your son. You left him when he was 3. You know, your husband left you because, you know, he hates you and you're crazy. And your family hates you. And so that's my ex-family. Okay, they're Republicans. And so anyway, but once something goes out there, it's hard to get back. You know, and so they can announce stuff. And I was just recently in North Carolina, and this lady who was supposedly a Democratic Obama supporter, I do that a lot, she started saying that she was going to protest me because I physically go and protest at dead soldiers' funerals. I've never done that. I've been to one dead soldier's funeral, and that's my son's. And then I told her through the media, I've never done that. Prove it. And she said, well, I heard it all over the place. Show me a picture. Prove. Tell me a date I was there. You know, so I just want to tell one story about the media that, like, says it all. I was on Hardball once, MSNBC, Chris Matthews. Right. And so he wasn't there that time. It was Nora O'Donnell. She's worse. She's worse than Chris. And so I started off on the wrong foot because I thought she was Kelly O'Donnell. And so I walked in, I said, wow, Kelly, you lost weight. And she goes, what are you talking about? I said, you know, when you were in Crawford, you were heavier. And she said, I've never been to Crawford. I said, yes, you have. You interviewed me there. And she goes, you must be thinking about Kelly O'Donnell. I'm Nora. And so I was like, oh, okay, sorry, Kelly. And then they take themselves way too seriously. And so anyway, I was on the air with her, in the studio with her. And she said, Cindy, we play hardball here. And I was like, bring it on, Kelly. And so I'm not even lying. This is exactly the exchange we had. And so it was taped, and she introduced me as the woman who met with communist dictator Hugo Chavez. And so then we broke for a pretend break, and I said, Kelly, you know that, I don't know why she doesn't like me, you know that Chavez is not a communist. He's a democratic socialist. And you know he's not a dictator. He's been elected many times. He survived a coup attempt from our own CIA. And the last election, Jimmy Carter certified. So that's not a dictator. She goes, you know what she told me? Her exact words. We know that. But we had a meeting and decided to call him that anyway. So they not only disseminate false information, they have meetings to do it. And they know they're doing it. And like I said, once it's out there, you can't get it back. And so even people on the faux aggressive left, they tell me, you know, your message would be more credible if you wouldn't go meet with communist dictators. And I'll say, what communist dictator have I met with? I haven't met with any communist. I have never had a meeting with a communist dictator. Which one are you talking about? You know, so once things get out there, it's hard to rein them back in. And I would recommend, I just did a in-depth one-on-one interview with President Chavez in Uruguay. And I would recommend that you guys listen to it on my website, Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. And just listen. And I'm doing a documentary about the trip, too, that'll be out pretty soon. So anyway, I would recommend if, you know, you get both sides of the story. Don't just listen to the corporate media in the United States side of a story. Get both sides and then decide what you believe. Not what Kelly O'Donnell or Nora O'Donnell wants you to believe, but what, you know, decide for yourself what you're going to believe. Recently, since the media has discovered that I'm still against the wars, even though we have a President Obama, they've been starting to start a little bit paying more attention to at least the consistency of the message. They've never really agreed with the message, but they're paying more attention to the consistency of it. But haven't been able to devote a lot of time to investigating 9/11. But one thing that tells me is that we don't know the real story is that George Bush told us that was the real story. You know, and when he came, I think it was 2 days after 9/11, and he said, I don't want to hear any crazy conspiracy theories. It was Muslims that we were attacked. And when he said that, knowing him, I thought, well, it must be a crazy conspiracy theory. You know, if he told us not to believe it. And this is another thing is that people on my side of whatever, the political spectrum, they want to believe that he lied about Iraq. Not just him, but his entire administration lied about Iraq. They lied about WMD. They lied about the connection between Osama and Saddam. They lied about everything. But all of a sudden they're telling the truth about 9/11. You know, so I don't think we know the entire story. I don't know if we ever will. But another thing I know is the 9/11 Commission was put in place to support the official story. It was not a credible investigation. So I think at least a credible investigation is warranted for 9/11. I think that our young people, and I'm just going from experience of going to public schools, you know, my whole life, and my children went to Catholic school for a while, but then they went to public school. I think that the No Child Left Behind and underfunding of public education is, and teaching to the tests is making our young people, they don't have critical thinking skills. We have young people here, I'm not saying they're all stupid, but and it's not just the education system, you know, it's the entire system, it's the media, you know, it's video games, it's, you know, the kids, who does Madison Avenue market to? Young people. You know, they know that young people drive the purchasing power of families. And so it's the whole, like, I think there's like a whole system put in place so we don't do critical thinking. Now, when I was going to school, it was of course different. We had music, we had the arts, we had drama, we had, everything, and we didn't have to pay extra for it. And so we did get a wider general education. But some things combined to stop that. And I believe one of those was the campus unrest during the Vietnam War. And they saw that, the Robert class saw that as a stumbling block to their agenda. And of course, the students on campuses were a major force in activism, in radicalizing people, in stopping the wars. They were a major force in it. But in California, I don't know how it was in New York, but in California during the 60s and early 70s, it was free to go to State University.
It was free here.
And so you didn't have to go. State universities in California were free. And so from community college to the university system and then the intermediate colleges, they were free to go to. So you didn't have to go to lifelong debt. You didn't have to work. My daughter's a grad student at San Francisco State. She has loans and she has to work. When she gets out with her master's, she's going to owe $100,000. So that puts a lot of pressure on our young people. They're working, they're trying to maintain their grades, and they have a lot of pressure on them. So the rare students who can do activism also are really valuable because they are also very rare. And another thing that they did, which wasn't altruistic, is they did away with the draft. They knew that the draft was a major organization tool for the anti-war movement. And I don't believe it was an altruistic measure to get rid of it. And now with the Obama administration, No Child Left Behind, No Child Left Behind is also a recruiting tool for the military. The military, if the schools get federal funding, the military has full access to the school and to your child's directory information. And I think that really this whole economy, education, even at state schools, is so expensive. Why did my son Casey even join the military? To get university education. And so that's why our young people are joining the military, because of the economy. They can't find a job, they can't afford to go to school, and so they don't need a draft. And now they have Obama. For the first time in 6 years, last October, our militaries met their recruitment goals. For the first time in 6 years. And it's not all about the economy either. So, and I see the rhetoric now is to blame the teachers. Well, the teachers, there are some really bad teachers. There's some teachers that I had that I hope are roasting in hell right now. But that's just, how many people that had teachers, raise your hand if you can't think of one teacher that you hope is roasting in hell right now. Okay. Oh, you were very lucky. You must have been homeschooled. No? What about Miss McMurray, who made me stand in the corner because I didn't want my head blown off by a communist? So anyway, so now they have this whole thing of they're going to have teacher, goals or markers. If they don't meet them, but they're trying to do the best they can under the most difficult of circumstances, large class sizes, no funding. I know so many teachers that spend a lot of their paycheck on material for their classrooms. So yeah, it's a horrible situation that we're in. And I am for public school. You know, I think public school was set up to be a great equalizer, but now it's not. Obama wants to privatize the schools, to do charter schools. And this is becoming another elitist system. But everybody has the civil right to a decent education. Well, even if 9/11 is the official story, 16 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. And we didn't go and invade Saudi Arabia, you know? So yeah, I think that first of all, we should always want the truth about everything. You know, and secondly, that tragic incident on September 11th has been exploited to now kill, you know, over 1 million Iraqis. We don't know how many Afghans, we don't know how many Pakistanis, but since Obama's been president, the number of Pakistani civilians dying has risen to from 700 a month to 12,000 a month. I just went to a conference in Valley Forge called Treason in America, and it was mostly 9/11 truth activists, and I was really one of the only people on the left that's from the anti-war movement. I think to have a movement that's effective, we need everybody. You know, we need to set some things that we all agree on. Like, we need a new investigation for 9/11. We need our troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, we even have some libertarian anti-war people who can agree on those. So we have to kind of set, for some of us those goals are not enough, and for some of us they might be too much. So what we have to do is I think we need to find a set of principles that most of this country can agree on and then work together, or nothing's going to change. If it's just 8,000 people marching in a circle in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, you know, and then those 8,000 people, most of them, think that I did my part. Now I can go home and kick back and drink a beer. You know, so yeah, I do think that we need more. We have to agree to disagree on what we disagree on, because believe me, I have some fundamental disagreements with libertarians. But we agree a lot on a lot of things we agree on. I think that no matter how much I disagree with anybody, they should have the right to speak, and they should do civil disobedience. But I've never heard once anybody from the anti-war movement threatening to assassinate anybody. You know, so I think that, and I made the distinction between Tea Party and tea baggers. The tea baggers are the one I think that are being manipulated by the wackos on the right. And, you know, there are wackos on the left. I've been called that a lot. And so anyway, I think that they have the right to do that. And I said in my speech too, I understand their frustration with not being heard. You know, they go disrupt anybody you want. Disrupt Congress, disrupt your congressperson. You know, hold your signs, go to rallies. I think that we all need to do that. And then we need to say, I disagree with you, and I disagree with you adamantly about some things, but I support your right to be doing this. And I would hope that other people would give me that same courtesy. There's nobody in power that will listen to us. So that's one of the things. Why do we think that we don't have power? You know, we, the people, have the power. But I think here in this country, we've been beaten down to be afraid of our own power. You know, and so that's where I was before my son was killed. I was like, I don't agree with these wars. I don't agree with George Bush. But I'm only one person. What can I do about it? And I think I proved that one person can do something about it. I mean, I'm not a political pundit. I don't have advanced university degrees. I haven't been coached or schooled, or I don't have a machine behind me. No matter what the right says, George Soros doesn't fund me. I wish he did. You know, but look what I've been able to accomplish, because I got off my ass and I said, I don't know if I can make a difference, but I'm going to try, So why do we think that these people, because they're really the only ones that have the power to physically change something at the top. But we have the power to change everything in our communities, in our families, within ourselves. And I think we need a combination of both. You know, I think we need community activists that are really community activists. And then I think we need a mass movement. But we don't have a mass movement. So that's why we need to strengthen ourselves. We live, like I said, in a psychopathic empire. And you're looking at the person, probably the person in this room that's been most affected by that empire. But I get up every day. And I get up every day knowing that I can change the world. And when those young people came to Camp Out Now, they also know they can change the world. And they gave me a lot of hope that we can do something about this psychopathic empire. But constantly relying on Demopublicans or Republicrats. You know, one of my friends, Mathis Chiro, say we have to stop smoking that Democrat. You know, that we can. You know, I'm the person in this room that has the most right to stay in bed crying and grumbling all day. But I know that I can make a difference. And I know you can make a difference. And that's why I flew an awful flight from California to Syracuse to get here to convince you that you can do it. And not to take... Not to give you false hope, but to give you real hope. You know, I don't want anybody leaving here feeling more depressed than when they walked in. So I'm glad you asked that question. But, you know, we just have to get away from the fact that our federal elected officials will do anything to help us. You know, they won't. And if they ever do, it's only because it helped them more. You know, so please just know that I came here, and I hope that not just my talk, but my life will inspire other people to do the same. And you don't have to do what I do. What I do is crazy. You know, I travel all the time. I sleep in a different bed every night. I go and spend a weekend in jail. You know, what I do is not for most people. But you can do something, and you can do a little more than you're doing already. You know, and if you can make one person or two people or three people, if you can make their life better, then your life was worth it. You know, so that's what I'm trying to get across to people. Everybody thinks that we have to make these big sweeping changes. No, we don't. You know, it's the little changes that make most of the difference, because they're the ones that happen every day. What my opinion is of being an astute observer is that how does somebody go from state senator to president of the United States in 5 years? You know, and so I think that looking from his speech at the Democratic National Convention in 2004 is that he was being groomed. And I think the robber class, or some people want to call them the ruling class, I don't call them the ruling class, because I didn't put them in place to rule over me, I put them in place to work for me. And actually, I didn't put them in place. People that I vote for rarely win anything. So anyway, George Bush, I'm sorry, but George Bush wasn't the first president that lied to us. George Bush was not the first president that got us into illegal and immoral wars. He wasn't the first president to do many covert, illegal things. He wasn't the first president to listen to our phone calls. I picture him sitting in his office. But he was the most arrogant one to do it. He just said, you know, his basic message was F you. If you're not with me, you're against me. So you can just go to hell. And people started to wake up. People started to say, you know, this is wrong and what's going on is wrong. But like I said, Barack Obama voted to extend the Patriot Act. Barack Obama voted for the FISA Modernization Act. Barack Obama not only voted for the bankster bailout, but he made Democratic Congress people change their votes. That was illegal, by the way. The House rejected that bill. Then it went to the Senate, and they approved it, and then it went to the House. If any of you remember your civics lessons, where do all funding bills originate? In the House of Representatives. So anyway, I think that, you know, one of the good things about Barack Obama is, of course, he's not a white person. I mean, I'm not saying that. That's horrible. That was an awful thing to say. He was our first president of color. But I think that says more about us than it says about him. You know, that we were ready to have a person of color. But George Bush left the presidency with a 23% approval rating. That is abysmal. That's the worst in history. So the ruling class or robber class needed somebody who was slick, needed somebody that could pronounce nuclear, needed somebody that was pretty. Yes, exactly. I just call him a kinder, gentler face of the empire. You know, and so, I don't think that a person achieves the, what do you call it, the nominations of the Democratic or Republican Party without compromising, without selling out, you know, without making a lot of concessions. And to me, that already says that's a person of low character. You know, if they sell out their values to achieve an office, but you know what? I would probably forgive him if he did anything that moved us away from the Bush administration. I would forgive him anything if he did anything that would resemble anything that the people who voted for him wanted. But I think the one good thing that we might learn from the Obama administration that we should have learned from the Clinton administration, sometimes I say Obama's the best Republican we've had since Clinton, you know, is that it's not, there's no difference. No difference. You know, Ralph Nader says there's a dime's worth of difference in the Democrats and the Republican Party. I don't even think it's that much. I think Ralph is giving them too much credit. So that's my, and I don't know. You know, I would hope, being an optimistic person, that his values are being challenged from the things that he has to do. But I honestly, I have no idea. So I think we only have 20 more minutes. So I think this is time for people to, if they want to purchase Myth America, if you can't do it tonight, you can always do it online through my website, Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. And I have another website, peaceoftheaction.org or cindysheehansoapbox.com if you would like to purchase this book online. Or there are the books, if any of you are able to read paper books anymore, they have some paper books up there. So thank you again so much for coming. Thank you.